Hey you guys, welcome back to my studio. Today I'm going to show you how I painted this hummingbird. I began a series of studies of hummingbirds because I want to continue to improve my motion blurs, and hummingbirds' wings are a perfect way to study them. I've painted this image, which I found on the Facebook group Free Reference Photos for Artists. The talented photographer was Don Barrick, and he graciously has given me permission to make tutorials from his photos. So thank you, Don. I've painted this 4 times, twice on cold press, once on hot press, and once on Yupo. So in this video, I'll focus on showing you how I painted this on cold press, which is, by the way, my favorite paper, and after trying other papers, it definitely will remain a favorite. I find that other papers just don't allow the smooth blending that I really enjoy. But let's get started and I'll explain my approach as we go. So I started this painting on cold press paper, 140-pound arches. As I start many paintings, and especially this painting because I really wanted it to capture the look of this bird being in motion, I paint it on wet paper. So to start, I wet all the areas with clear water that I want paint on, and I do work in sections. So here I painted clear water over the head and carefully avoided the beak because I want the beak to be bright white. And I left a few little jewelry pieces of white, just kind of specks, just to add a little bit of interest. And then I go in with tea consistency paint, then milk consistency paint, then cream consistency paint in each section. And I don't know if you could see, but I did add salt to his head just to give him a little more texture in his head. And the best time to add salt when you're painting a watercolor is in the first wash. It works best when you add salt in the first wash. And hummingbirds have all those tiny little feathers, so salt really works well to create the illusion of little tiny feathers, especially in the head area. And the colors that I'm using include Winsor Green Gold, Permanent Green Light, Ultramarine Blue, and Naphthol Red. I also used some burnt sienna, especially in the wings, as they appear to be a little bit more brown, and some Winsor Violet. And those are the main colors I use. And as you can see, I painted this whole thing on very wet paper. To wet the paper, I use my Silver Black Velvet oval brush, which holds a lot of water. And by the way, I just bought some Silver Black Velvet watercolor brushes, and a set of 3 was $45. So it's really not bad for what you get because they are natural hair brushes and they hold a lot of water and they have beautiful points. So I can highly recommend them. And again, you can see I'm wetting this whole painting, and I'm going to paint in a little bit of background just to help the lighter areas of the bird pop out some more. I paint negatively around the beak to keep the beak white. I didn't use any masking this time around, and I keep that very back wing really wet and just paint into it with cream consistency or milk consistency paint to keep that wing really, really loose and blurred. And then the front wing, I paint a little bit drier, but still pretty wet because that wing is in motion too. And so I paint it very softly with wet water put on first, and then I go in with my paint. Also, one thing to keep in mind is when you're working on really wet paper, you'll need more paint in your brush to get the darkness you want. So for those dark areas of the wings, I really had to put a lot of cream consistency paint in my brush so that the wings would be dark enough. Then I use a rigger to paint the eyes because they are so tiny, and I get the little feet in. I continue to develop little small details as I go, and just like you work from tea to milk to cream consistency as a painting progresses, you work with large brushes first, and then as you get towards the end of the painting, you'll be working with smaller brushes and putting in the small little details. And then I use my scrubber brush here. I did make a whole video about my scrubber brush. I use it on pretty much every painting, and I'm using it now to soften some of the edges because I want pretty much every single edge to be hard except maybe the beak and the eye, because those are points of interest, but the rest is all soft and blurred out. I also keep the background really loose and wet when I paint into it, and I use a couple different colors just to make sure that the background stays soft and interesting. You don't want one flat color in your background, you want at least 2 or 3. And in my background here, I used ultramarine blue and permanent green light. And I just continue to add paint to build up the values. And like I always say, it's more important to get your values right than it is to get your colors right. Because if your values are right, it doesn't really matter as much what colors you use. And again, in the wings, I used burnt sienna and Winsor violet. And you can see that I added quite a bit of darks to that front wing to really make it pop out. And I'm putting a little bit darker background behind the lighter areas of the bird's body just to pop out those parts of the bird's body. I especially wanted that thin white line along the top of that front wing to really pop out. So I left the top edge of it bright white just to add some interest and some jewelry. And here I've got my scrubber again. I'm softening all those hard edges. I don't really want hardly any hard edges in this painting, except in this tiny little details in the eye and again, of course, the beak. But I even scrubbed with the scrubber along that edge of the beak to keep it soft. And here is the final product. I think, especially when you look up close in this painting, because I painted it so wet and wet, the details are just so pretty. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Stay tuned. I publish new videos every Tuesday and Thursday, and if you would like to watch this tutorial in more depth, it'll probably at least be an hour long. You can join my Patreon. I hope you tune in next week. I'll have 2 more videos coming your way, so subscribe and I'll see you later.